So I hope the volume, it's okay, sound is okay. Thank you everybody for coming. I just want to double check that the streaming is already on. It's working? Perfect. So for everybody, we're streaming this session. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. For those who don't know me, I'm Catalina Gonzalez. I'm the director of the Office of International Affairs at UniAndes. And today is a very special day. We're receiving friends, longtime friends. Some of us are meeting for the first time in person, but we've been having conversations online and historically. And thank you. And thank you again for joining us. We will have streaming throughout the session, so please bear that in mind. And you can share this session afterwards. We can share that information with everybody. So I would like first to thank our guest today, Professor Mukherjee. Thank you very much for coming. President Raquel Bernal, Professor Tatiana Luis, and Stefan Peters, thank you very much. The proposal today is to have an open conversation about higher education. Many things have changed in the past 2 years, and in the past month or 40 days or so, the world seems to be unrecognizable sometimes. So sitting within Universidad de los Andes, we want to have a nice conversation today. I'm going to address a couple of questions to each of you, and we will have time at the end for questions coming from the public. So let me start, Professor Mukherjee, first with you. You're not only president of the Giessen University, but also president of the German Academic Exchange Service, DAD, or DAD as others may know of it. You also have many years of experience in managing higher education institutions, including international collaborations. Thanks to these roles and experiences, you have a privileged perspective of higher education in Germany and Europe. Our question today is, considering this, would you say that the recent years have been transformative for higher education? If yes or no, could you please share with us your insights in what you consider are some of these key transformations? What would you like to highlight and the take-home message for everybody here today?
Thank you very much for the invitation and for setting up also this panel with distinguished colleagues here to the left and to the right, and also for attending this session. It's, I think, a wonderful point in time to reflect on our experiences of the past 2 years. And we already talked about various experiences that we shared over the past 2 years during the morning sessions that we had. Of course, your questions, I mean, they could trigger off a monologue of mine of 2 hours or 3. And I guess that would be the same for everyone here. So I will try to nail it down to perhaps 2 or 3 key issues that I find are lessons to be learned from the pandemic period of the past 2 years. So one is definitely, yes, it has been a transformative phase, simply because many routines were discontinued, had to be discontinued, about more in a second. And because we had to find new ways, new options for keeping in touch, for developing our projects, for keeping projects alive. But then on the other hand, it has not been transformative in the sense that certain key values, certain key components of higher education have remained the same. I mean, we see that today. We all feel that this is the way, you know, exchange in higher education should be, face-to-face, with personal meetings to build trust. And this is also the boundary, or the boundary of what is possible in the digital world. So with this in mind, I would say there are 2 or 3 key components or key issues that I would like to raise with regard to the past 2 years. One is, of course, the past 2 years have been transformative. because we didn't have international physical mobility as we had it until the beginning of 2020. And that was a shared global experience. It affected everyone in the world. We had different waves in different countries, different developments of the corona pandemic in different countries, but still it was a fundamentally global experience, a shared experience. And it led to a digital transformation, an ad hoc transformation, I would say. No one had a plan in the drawer, but we had to make things possible, of which we in 2019 probably would not have thought they would be possible, they would be even viable. And I believe Uniandes has been very successful in keeping the university alive with the digital formats. We have been, I would say, also successful as all higher education institutions. And what is amazing is that also the partnerships, international partnerships have been kept alive with digital meetings, digital formats, and mobility has been exchanged by digital exchange formats. Of course, we have to keep in mind certain things are not possible in the digital format, but of course, many things are possible. And with the whole background of the discussion about sustainable mobility, more sustainable mobility, our carbon footprint, I think we have learned a lot in the past 2 years that will help us in making mobility more sustainable, in the sense that we can decide in the future, based on experience of the past 2 years, where do we need physical meetings? Where do we have to have international mobility with face-to-face meetings? But where are also project meetings, other formats possible with virtual elements? The second thing I think is that I find is very important as a lesson to take home from the past 2 years is that strategic partnerships have been more successful over the past 2 years than, networks, loose networks of people, individual links with perhaps no long-standing history of collaboration. And I feel this has a lot to do with the shared basis of trust. And if there is a shared basis of trust, like between Uniandes and Giessen, I mean, this has been a 60-year-old collaboration. So many people here know so many people in Giessen and vice versa. Of course, if you know each other well, then you can keep things alive over a period of 2 years with digital formats, with alternative exchange formats. And I think we have been very successful over the past 2 years because we have this shared base of trust. And from the DAB perspective, this also means that we have to push higher education institutions in the light of this experience of the past 2 years into that direction. Focus on strategic partnerships. Try to do more with fewer partners. Try to build a broad base of links between individuals, between faculties, between centers, so that there is a solid base of trust, so that you can get this collaboration between two higher education institutions also through a difficult phase like the one we had in the past 2 years. And number 3, and that brings me then to the end of my mini monologue here, to which you have to which you invited me also with your question. The third thing is we should be really self-confident as higher education institutions in the light of the past 2 years. My colleague of the University of Mainz is the place where BioNTech is based. We talked about BioNTech earlier today already. So everyone in Germany is very proud of BioNTech. And everyone wants to get a shot from BioNTech and not from Moderna, because this is a sign of local patriotism in Germany, I feel. But of course, what I wanted to drive home is my colleague at the last meeting of the German Rectors Conference, he said, we have to tell the politicians we need more money because we save the world. He said that. We save the world. Of course, this is very pathetic in a sense, but there is a grain of truth in it. I mean, what we learned in the past 2 years, what everyone learned in the public, in the political sphere, is how important academia is, how important basic research is, how important science is. And in a sense, Georg Krausch, my colleague, is right in saying, yeah, of course, we developed vaccines so rapidly. I mean, within 12 months, who would have thought that? Or 9 months, actually. And of course, vaccination was the major instrument to get out of the pandemic. And from that experience, we should also take some self-confidence. We should not be shy in applying for money, in asking for additional funding, because everyone saw over the last 2 years how important investment into science and research and higher education is. I leave it at that.
Thank you for inspiring us with those words, Professor Mukherjee. Professor Bernal, you have been a long-time professor, Vice Rector for Academic Affairs, and since last year, acting president at Universidad de los Andes. I want to pose a similar question to what I just asked to Professor Mukherjee, but now, of course, taking a perspective from Uniandes, and if you want, also from Colombia, as a university based in Colombia. How do you consider, has higher education changed in recent years? What are these large transformations you have perceived recently, your experience?
Thank you, Cata. So after 2 years of pandemic, I cannot master the mask and the glasses and the microphone. I won't be able to see you completely, but. So first of all, good morning to everybody. It's just such a pleasure to have our visitors here in Uniandes today. Thank you so much for visiting. I was talking to Professor Mukherjee, and he mentioned we're no longer strategic partners, we are institutional friends. And this is how we feel about this alliance between Giessen and Uniandes. And it's a real pleasure to see you here after 2 years. We were reminiscing before the start of the event that we had a visit planned to Giessen right for the end of March, right, Susan? Approximately. So it was when we closed, when here our airport was closed, we had to go visit. So we have that visit pending, hopefully sometime soon. So welcome. Thank you everybody for being with us. It's a real pleasure to have you visit and meet you in person, Professor Mukherjee and all the visitors here. So many things have happened. I think that the pandemic made us realize the huge challenges and opportunities that the education sector is facing for the next couple of decades. I think we were being very shy in regards to digital transformation and to all other transformations that we are facing as education, as higher education institutions. Transformation, technology, digital transformation has already changed so many economic sectors. So the financial sector has changed dramatically. Entertainment, news, media has changed significantly, and we were being shy. We were traditional institutions. So I didn't know that you were founded in 1607. So that is very traditional. And I think the pandemic made it clear that we have to change and that we can do it, and that we have the innovation, the creativity, and the minds in our faculty that can lead us through that transformation, that can potentially improve the learning of the students in very significant ways. We have learned that actually through that digital transformation, we can humanize education. So this is what happened during the pandemic. So we were in our students' homes and they were in our homes. And it just was a sign of solidarity, of humanization that was really incredible. I think we have been reluctant to technology because we feel it is far from being close and from humans interacting. I think we can really leverage on technology to make things better in terms of learning of our students. In addition to that, over the last couple of decades, we have learned so much through neuroscience about how human beings learn. So when we were able to measure what happens in the brain, we now know exactly how that happens, and we can leverage and optimize the learning process in very different ways that it's clear we can do more efficient with technology. So adaptive learning and flexible learning paths, follow up of our students in a more detailed way so that we can know who's learning fast, who's learning slow, what's the problem, where can we help. And really, again, because we're so traditional, it's been difficult to change from that professor that teaches to being that teacher that guides through a learning process that it's more autonomous, more active, exploration, and so on and so forth. And then the life expectancy has increased so significantly and will keep increasing precisely because of technology. And that also poses a lot of challenges, but mostly opportunities for the education sector, because from working 40 years, we'll move to working 60 years. Yeah, excited. And that will require us to reinvent ourselves, to qualify, reskill, what they're calling the reskilling, upskilling, but I call it reinventing. It's really going to be exciting, actually. So you do something for 30 years, and at this point, I wanted to learn something different. And this is going to be our job at the universities, to make those dreams happen for people. And I think that's extremely exciting, really, the possibility of addressing very different challenges and opportunities in the future, not only for young people, because we're no longer going to have, this 18 to 21 student. We will have those students as well, but we really will have people all over their lives coming back to us to make those dreams happen. And in that scenario, I cannot see how this will happen if we don't work in collaboration with other academic institutions and with other providers that will emerge in the very near future that are already here working along us. And so this international collaboration becomes really very important because students are now global. Really, this is a reality after the pandemic. It's evident. That our students are global. They can be here, there, without taking a flight. And so it becomes really more important that we collaborate in creating those learning environments that are gonna promote those competencies for the global citizens, for the world in which we're totally communicated in real time, understanding not only the local issues, but issues in the globe, that we have to resolve interdisciplinary. So the most important issues for the next couple of decades are interdisciplinary in nature. So climate change, sustainability, inclusion, diversity, poverty. So all of those things require an interdisciplinary look, a more holistic view. And this cries out for collaboration nationally and internationally. And so it becomes very important to have these institutional friends like you, that we can really build different models, different perspectives, and innovate, be leaders in creating these new dreams for people in the next couple of decades. In terms of research, well, I think similar opportunities arise, of course, because we will be able to collaborate without traveling, although I agree that we have to keep these face-to-face meetings alive always. But collaborating becomes easier. Now we have digital labs. We can share research resources online, which I think it's going to be fantastic for the developing world, working with the North. I think we should leverage more in doing those kinds of things so that in the next pandemic, we can invent the vaccine. And so I see a lot of opportunities. Many of them will be leveraged on technology, and technology will change the labor market significantly. So it's not only about reinventing and the global citizen, but also about 50% of occupations as we currently know them will disappear over the next decade. And the universities are called to create the new occupations, basically, not even wait for them to emerge, but create them. And again, I think this challenge is really exciting. It's a fantastic opportunity for us as higher education institutions to reinvent ourselves and to build these collaborations for this exciting future.
Thank you, Professor Bernal, for your likewise inspiring words. And hopefully it sounds like a promising future for higher education. Professor Luis, I'm going to take advantage of this moment to thank you personally, because you're one of our best ambassadors within the university. You always show up, you always collaborate in all of our sessions, so it's fantastic to have you here as well. You have several years of experience collaborating with German institutions. From a practical perspective, how has your experience of international academic collaborations been during these years of the COVID-19 pandemic? What have you learned? What would you like others to know?
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very glad, as my colleagues, to see you here in person. And although we are talking about virtual education, amongst other things, I think we also appreciate being here in person again. I think we have learned a lot during the last 2 years. New situations, and the pandemic definitely was a new situation to all of us, require new ideas. They open new opportunities, and in that way, they open ways to innovate. And I think every once in a while in education, it is important to have that in mind, because teaching is also a process of relying on experience. And experience every once in a while has the challenge that we don't like to change that much. And when the university closed down 2 years ago, we had a week, our spring break, to reinvent the wheel. And although that was a big challenge, I think we took the opportunity to really rethink what we are doing. Obviously, teaching in virtual or hybrid formats require other strategies, other ways of leading the students through their learning process. And we had the opportunity to introduce the new technologies, to introduce new strategies. We also learned where we need to learn more. I think the broad field of university or higher education didactics is a field where we can do way more, where we can think about how to motivate young adults to learning, how to help them to convert themselves in their own master of their own process. I think we also can see that we still have a long way to go, and I totally agree with my colleagues that collaboration, international cooperation, collaboration is necessary there, because we face, in the end, we face the same problems, no? And so I think, that is something we learned. One big advantage I see in virtual or hybrid formats is that it allowed us to reach out to way more people than we used to. I have participated in conferences and workshops where we had people attending from India, from Australia, from literally from all over the world. And we could exchange with these people. We could talk with people from all over the world, hear their perspective, their views, their point of views. And that is something we didn't have before. Although in virtual formats we lose some of the dynamics of international workshops and conferences, on the other hand, we gain, we reach out to many, many people. And that works on a big scale, on conferences, on workshops, but that also works with our courses we offer in the university. So especially with Stefan Peters, we had several experiences with binational seminars, for example, where students from Giessen and from Universidad de los Andes shared the same course. It was a kind of a mini exchange program that permitted students of both universities to get into contact with their peers in other countries, to especially for our language students, obviously, this is a big chance to have like a first immersion, actually, into other contexts. And I think these are formats we definitely need to explore more, not to replace our traditional formats, but to complement our traditional formats. And that is something I think, it's something we learned and what we need to explore more.
Thank you, Professor Lewis, and for sharing especially those activities that you've been working with University of Giessen as well. It's one of the top examples that we had over the past 2 years, as well with doctoral students, if I remember correctly. So, Professor Peters, your turn. You are the academic and scientific director of a binational institute, CAPAS. You play a slightly different role. So under the umbrella of this center, several German and Colombian institutions collaborate in different formats and topics. In addition to this role, you're also a professor at Giessen University. Would you like to share with us your perspectives of collaboration? Maybe mention specifically experiences through CAPAS that you would like to highlight, considering, of course, the different components and formats that we now experience.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. And I just wanted to complement one point of the experience Tatiana Luis and I had in this course. It's of course of learning together, and it was on the role of memory for in Germany and in Colombia. So, and we learned a lot about these perspectives. So why, for instance, we always see Germany as like a very good example of memory, and where we also might find some problems and so on. But I do agree that we cannot say that it's really the same as the normal traditional mobility. However, there were also some kind of intercultural experiences, and I just wanted to say, I guess for the German students, it was totally impossible to understand that we started here at 6:30 a.m. Sorry, so no one in Germany would, I guess, and I do not want to give new ideas to the President Mukherjee, and no one would attend at 6:30 a seminar. So I think that's also part, and if you perhaps have participated in a normal traditional mobility, you know that these kind of stories, that's also part of it. A second point I think all of you mentioned is the issue of bringing people together from very different parts of the world. And actually, yes, I'm working, I'm the director of the German-Colombian Peace Institute, and it's binational. But we really so it's not that binational, it's international. We had also students, well, basically the same you told us, from all over the world. Of course, most of them from Colombia, then Germany, then other parts. And in some way or another, I guess many of us thought, well, we're really kind of a global community, the global village, the dream of globalization. However, it's still a divided one. It's still a divided one, and we still have people who do not have that access. That might be because of internet connectivity. That might be because of language skills. That might be because of time. They don't have that much time because they have to work in other, well, to make a living. So I guess that's also something we learned. You also told us, yeah, it was that we were invited to the homes of our students. And of course, we all saw a lot of pets and a lot of whatever.
Kids.
And kids, and yeah. And on the other hand, I'm really a fan of motivating students to switch on the cameras. But we know that not everyone is comfortable or feels comfortable with that. And that also has to do with social, or might have to do with social conditions. So I think that's also something we have to have in mind. And of course, just to give a short example, I have been teaching at Universidad de los Andes in, well, the first half of 2020, so when the pandemic starts, and we had one week to adapt. And a very similar course I taught some weeks later with students also from master students living basically in Chocó, in the Departamento de Chocó. And I guess there I really learned what this kind of divide of digital gap means. And so that brought me about thinking about, do we need new social rights? Do we need public policy that make, for instance, internet connectivity for all? Is that something we have to think about? And I think yes, we should. Then I also wanted to mention something generally, education, or at least what I perceive how normal people, whatever that is, perceive education is like a slow mover. Kind of institutions who really do not innovate. And we saw that's totally nonsense. It was so fast, this transformation. And I think we also saw a lot of adaptive capacity from professors, from administration, and something we often forget, from students. So at least in my case, I learned so much of students regarding these, well, instruments for doing online online samples and so on. So it was really, there were so many new things I learned, and that's one thing, but also the adaptive capacity from students. And we know they are in their 20s or whatever, and cannot go to the campus. So, and have to be all day, at the computer, and do not have the social context. And of course, that was a very, very hard situation for all of us. But I think we also have to always stress the way the students really helped us. They really, of course, they wanted to go back, but they agreed that that was important. That they had to be live in solidarity with the elder ones. And I think that's also something we have to stress. And also, Mr. Mukherjee talked about this example from the colleague from Mainz and the importance of science. Totally agree. But I think we also have, and unfortunately Germany would be an example, we also saw that there are so many people who think that science is just a story, or that it's just something, so they do not believe in science. They do not have trust in science. And that brings me to something I heard today in the morning in another meeting of in key feature of what Uniandes, and I think Giessen as well, and we in the Instituto Capaz as well, want to do, and that is impact, social impact. So we also have to stress what, or show society what we are doing. We have to be in contact and in discussion with society, also explain what we do. And actually, with all the things which I mentioned before of social inequality and so on, But I guess we also had this possibility to reach out to so many people, and to people who are not in Bogota, who are not in Giessen, who are not in the big cities with all the connectivity problems, but to have like seminars or talks, discussions with people from all over society. And I guess that's really important also, and that's we can reach out to persons perhaps we formerly didn't have so much in mind, or it was so difficult. And I just want to close with one remark. And I guess there is no one of us who now thinking of what we did sometimes with mobility for a meeting, just traveling within Colombia, within Germany, or even to another country. And today I think we all think, well, that was crazy. And of course we will not go back to that. It will be a transformation.
Thank you, Professor. I have my own microphone. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting the digital divide. It is a real issue. So before we open to the floor for some questions from the audience, based on what you just heard from the other participants, any last words, things that you would like to highlight, maybe to ask each other, to propose an invitation, anything? First hand, okay, so 1 and 2.
Yeah, what you just mentioned, the digital divide and the inclusion. So considering that technology can bring us to a new era of education, it is very critical to take into account the digital divide and making sure that it doesn't widen the gap, because it's possible, particularly in the developing world. And so I fully agree with the imperative need to work with governments in policy design that will allow, connectivity, but many other things that we need in order to, you're mentioning Chocó. So yesterday we were talking to one big technology provider here in Colombia and trying to agree to create digital environments in classrooms in Chocó. And so immediately she checked who's the provider in this region, and she said it's impossible. There's never going to be enough band in that region for anything that we could do. So it's a reality. It's very important to work on that. And another aspect that your comment made me think about is inclusion of different types of students. I mean, not related to technology, but inclusion. That was really a very significant aspect for us during the pandemic, because we really very lagged in terms of serving disability. And we made a lot of progress because of digital education and online education. So I think that is something that's going to be very important, and it's disability, but also different types of students, depending on how they learn, exactly what skills they come to the university with. So the possibility of inclusion, it has a huge potential, conditional and public policy working in favor of connectivity and all other aspects that could exclude certain groups of people. So I think it's very important.
Thank you.
Yeah, because it's meant to be a discussion, obviously, I would like to perhaps play devil's advocate in one or two regards here. Because, of course, what happens here is that we are a very homogeneous group, all from academia. And what very often happens at Giessen University is, of course, that we confirm ourselves in what we all believe and share to believe anyway. I feel that one lesson from the last 2 years should be for us that we enter a new phase, which is a phase of disruptions. So we had a disruption, this disruptive event of the pandemic, but there are more disruptions on the horizon. We are 10,000 kilometers away from Ukraine here, but in Germany and Europe, I mean, you can easily imagine what the atmosphere, how gloomy the atmosphere at the moment is. What does that actually mean for higher education? The sheer numbers of refugees coming from Ukraine into the European Union. And there are more disruptions on the horizon. So I believe that impact, I think that's a key word here in your strategic plan. I wholeheartedly agree. I think this is at the end of the day, especially when we act with the taxpayers' money, you with your funders' money, we as public institutions in Germany with the taxpayers' money. At the end of the day, it's always about impact and it's about what we can do to serve society. But another key issue, I think, and that's a lesson from the last 2 years, is resilience. How can we as higher education institutions become more resilient? How can we deal with new disruptions that are on the horizon? How can we deal with new refugee crises that are happening right now? And our public institutions have a role to play here, because higher education is no longer for an elite. I mean, 3 million students in Germany are enrolled at higher education institutions, 3 million. So this is no longer a niche. This is no longer for an elite. This is a mass phenomenon. And I think for good reasons, we also speak of mass universities in Germany, because we have this sheer number of students. And a final thing, if I may add that as a reaction to Stefan Peters, I think we will have to find a new balance of what we do in the digital format, what we do in the non-digital analogous format. But at the end of the day, it's always, I mean, collaboration is always about trust. It's about meeting. It's about the social aspects. And this, I feel, cannot be digitalized. And we will have to deal with the world where probably internet connectivity will not be the same everywhere. And there is hope to that extent, because I mean, physical meetings will always be part of what happens in higher education. So this is not going to go away, I believe.
Fantastic. One more, of course.
So I didn't want to be understood that way. So of course I do agree that we need meetings, and that's also something we learned at the Capas Institute, but I think we all learned. So we have new possibilities, but of course it's not the same, and especially when we do not know each other yet, then it's really hard to build trust. And for instance, when I think about graduate students or PhD students who just start their academic career, who need context, and who come to the next Zoom meeting and do not know anyone and would like to make contact, and that's so hard. And I think for these people, it has been much more difficult. And yeah, wanted to stress that as well. And perhaps also when you talked about the new challenges or the challenges, the disruptions, also I really liked the title, because it says post-pandemic. Really? I hope so. However, I'm not that sure. And you
Under
also,
review.
Professor Bernal, Rector Bernal, you also told that, well, the next pandemic, and actually it's hopefully not, but
100 years.
when we see, we hear about deforestation and what that means for human-animal contact and the risk for new pandemics, then I fear you're right. Or when we think about climate change and so on, that also are, of course, challenges we cannot, and that's we cannot solve just in Germany, just in Colombia. We need a global perspective, and we cannot, of course, we need science, but we also have to have science with impact, science with discussion, with society.
Professor Lewis and audience, please prepare yourselves for questions.
I will be brief, thank you.
That's fine.
No, I wanted to add to this final reflections we just heard from Professor Mukherjee and Stefan Peters. Maybe something else we learned during this pandemic, we are actually learning right now. And that is all the challenges related to mental health. When Raquel talked about the humanization of our students, I completely agree. We had access to their homes, they had access to our homes, and we entered in a new phase of seeing each other. And I think something we learned is how important it is to have human contact with our students and amongst us. And I think something we learned is up to a certain point also a new culture of caring about each other, of seeing the other with in his or her context, with his or her challenges, and how we deal with all this. And I think this is also, yeah, something very important. We are still learning, actually.
Thank you, Professor Lewis. And with those closing remarks, I would also like to add a very brief comment. I think higher education was perceived, and maybe for many still perceived, as a place just to learn new things, where it's knowledge-driven, content-driven, but it is human-driven, it's relationship-driven. This is where you meet friends for life, where maybe you meet your partner, where you find people to work with in the future. And that was completely highlighted during the pandemic, independent of the subject. Thank you all participants, and we're ready for the audience. We still have some minutes over there. Thank you. Should we use this microphone? Yes, okay. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much. My name is Pedro. I teach theater, so the challenge of the pandemic has been extremely extreme. But no matter, we still were able to teach the classes and to have a really good time throughout the pandemic. The challenge has been coming back from the pandemic. This semester, especially, last semester there was a lot of enthusiasm from the students, but now I feel like we came back, and there's the issue of mental health, as you well mentioned. But there's a lot of absences. I feel like the students are not really adjusted. Some of them don't want to come to class, or they, I'm having more absences than ever because of issues regarding mental health or problems at home. And then there's a problem of virtuality. What we discovered, which was actually useful throughout the pandemic, now we're struggling with that because the students are not connecting, or they're connecting from the bus. Well, in Transmillennials, they're coming to school, or they're all connecting from the cafeteria. So, the internet is not strong enough. So what about that challenge of we're coming out of the pandemic, but now we have a lot of scars that we have to reflect upon. And it's hard. I think there's a moment of readjusting, and I think there has to be deep reflection about that.
Who would like to comment? Okay, we can take two more questions or comments, and then you're in the front.
My name is Tim DeVogue, and I just happened to be visiting. I teach neuroscience courses at Cornell, and I want to chime in on the things that you said, which also reflect other people in the panel, that neuroscience does say that we are social creatures. Neuroscience does say that not just our social understanding, but our academic learning happens best in a social context for most people. And that's what's been taken away. And then the other, and needs to be replaced somehow. Little kids, especially university students as well, need that contact. But the other thing to reflect off the comment that we just heard is that from a place of relief, as perhaps the pandemic is ending, from a place of relief, we start to see the scars. And it's because we don't have to worry as much about all the details of COVID that now in my classes, I have people that are sick all the time. In my classes, I have people who are depressed, who are dealing with opiate issues. And I'm sure that all the rest of you who are teachers are seeing that as well. That from the relief, now the difficulties can be expressed. And that's going to be a concern for all of us in the months and years coming as well.
And one more comment here.
Yeah, we learned a lot today about digital divide and internationalization, and it seems Colombia and Germany has very similar problems. And for a long time, Germany was in a very comfortable situation because we have a very homogeneous group of students. Now with all the immigrants we're receiving, and Germany has become a true immigrating country. Now we have different ethnicities, we have different religions, and so we also have to learn, because digitalization and internationalization is not only a technical aspect, access to the internet, but it has also some cultural differences. And here I think it's a lot what we can learn from Colombia, because we are dealing with this problem for decades. And so I would like to know how you deal with this problem beyond the technical aspect, because this is what we can learn from you here, what you are doing in Colombia. Thank you very much.
I think we're ready. Gracias, Antonio. Who would like to go first? Professor Berna. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for such insightful comments. I fully agree with everything that has been said. I think we really have to go through this adaptation process. I mean, we're back to a new life. Our students were behind the screen for over 2 years. Some of them are in their 4th semester, but have never been in our campus. So they're newcomers. Were still at the middle of their career. There's still new students here at the university. So it's very complicated, actually. They think they're doing good, conditional on how deep the situation was. I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and my 13-year-old was very depressed over the pandemic, in a really very critical situation, medicated. And so I can completely relate. I fully understand how difficult it was for young people, for kids, for adolescents to undergo this situation. And then they change again. So they finally settle down, they get used to the room, they get used to the computer, and then we bring them out, and they're no longer used, or some of them, they have not developed the skills for socialization because they're adolescents, they were too young. So mine was 12 to 13, so terrible moment to be locked down with his parents at home. So I think for us, it's a responsibility to help to this adaptation. I think we are having a hard time really with absenteeism and mental health, and it's a challenge. So over the last 5 years, universities have multiplied by 6 their advising services to students because of these mental issues growing in such a significant way among young people. And I think a challenge, but again, I like to see things as an opportunity, is that you were mentioning that we showed that we can innovate and adapt. And I think that is true, but because we were forced to. And there is a huge risk that we go back to what we had done before. And I fear that we will do that because our students know that they can simply watch a PowerPoint presentation online. So they want to be in campus to do something different, because if you're just going to teach them with a PowerPoint, there's no point in making them drive here to the campus for an hour and then back to their homes for another hour. So as faculty, we really need to understand what's face-to-face education going to mean now. What is it that we want to do with that very valuable time with our students? So we really need to do, Pedro, that introspection and understand how we're going to give a new meaning to what we do in campus and how we're going to leverage for other things in technology. Understanding that social interactions are critical to learning and to certain abilities and skills that we are responsible to give to our students. So it's challenging, but I mean, understanding that we have to do that is the first step. And I just fear that we go back to normal. So we all came back to the campus and are teaching our classes just as we did before, and that cannot be. So we really need to challenge ourselves and try to understand exactly what is it that we want to have them here in campus, the social interactions, what are the activities that really are going to promote certain skills that we cannot do through a screen or through digital resources and other mechanisms. And so regarding immigration, I'm not sure, it's a fabulous question, very important, because I associate it here more to diversity of our student body and less to migration, because we have faced it, but it's a different type of migration. So we had the Venezuelan migration, the first stage of Venezuelan migration. This was the rich tier, let's say it that way. We got some of that migration, but really a lot of these families were very rich. They were sent to the US, some of them. And then the second wave of migration, we don't get it here at the university. It was really extremely poor migrants that come. But really, in terms of diversity, we have had amazing experiences with public programs. So you might know them. So we have the Serpilo Paga. This was a program that gave scholarships to the most socioeconomically vulnerable children, kids, but exceptional in terms of academic achievement. And at the very beginning of the program, we had about 500 students in entrant cohorts of 1,400. So that significantly changed the face of our university. That significantly changed the dynamics. And it was a very hard learning process, because we were not used to serving those different types of students. We were teaching to a homogeneous average student, and required a lot of learning. I think we did learn a lot and implemented a variety of academic and social strategies in order to include, to make this inclusion dream really a reality. And everything was a challenge. So it's not the language, but in a way it was, because we, from the very first semester, we teach in English, or some of the readings in the syllabi are in English, and the students just never learned any English. So it's an interesting process of inclusion that requires a lot of investment, a lot of individual advising, a lot of group interventions and strategies in order to include them. I think at this point we're at a very different stage of that process, in which we have developed, let's say, the technology to serve different types of students. So here, yes, we'd be very happy to share some of these experiences more in detail.
Well, I wasn't so sure whether I was supposed to speak now. Well, no problem at all. I wholeheartedly agree with the comments from the two gentlemen here about the post-pandemic, although it might be pre-pandemic in hindsight at the future point in time, that's for sure. But the current post-pandemic teaching situation, I think this is a ubiquitous phenomenon at higher education institutions. How do we deal with the traumatic experiences, and how do we get back to a new normal? I mean, the new normal in teaching can't be the normality of before the pandemic, because the experience is there. And as you correctly pointed out, I think we have to make the case for in-person teaching in a classroom. And the plausibility cannot be the same as it was before the pandemic. There has to be some extra value if we prefer in-person teaching, physical, in-presence teaching over digital formats. And then you referred to the students. I would like to add that at least at German universities, I'm not in a position to comment on the Colombian situation, might also be different between private and public institutions, and Uniandes is a quasi-public institution, I guess. But at German institutions, it's for sure that we enter problems with our instructors, lecturers, professors as well, because many of them we can't get back to the campus. And that's an odd thing. In Germany, we have professors who live 500, 600 kilometers away from their university. They commute during the lecture period. They stay for 2 or 3 nights. We have this fantastic abbreviation for this kind of professors, DMIDO. DMIDO stands for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in Germany, in the German language. So they come on Tuesday, stay for 2 nights at most, and then move back to their hometown. So this is a widespread phenomenon at German universities, especially in the humanities, And of course, I mean, many people feel I can do this from home. Why should I come to campus after the pandemic? And that's very difficult for us at the moment. It's not only the students and making the case for, teaching on campus, it's also our colleagues, our professors, our instructors, our lecturers, and the question how do we get them back to the campus for the teaching purposes. When it comes to diversity, just allow me one more comment because I'm playing again devil's advocate. Bear with me.
Perfect.
I think it's important for us when we deal with issues of diversity, also when it comes to issues of the importance of science and research, at least in the German situation, that we don't create a false impression here. It's not the case that we in higher education, in the sphere of academia, are the perfect world, and we have to explain the others outside academia how things should be. I mean, if we were masters of diversity management, how come there has never been a female president at Uniandes? How come there has never been a female president at my university? How come that only 26% of professors at my university are female, or 30%? How come that, significant parts of the population are not represented proportionately in our student population? So there is a lot we have to deal with also when it comes to diversity management in higher education. And I guess we are a miniature version of the society at large here as well.
Thank you. Well, I think, getting back to what we still have to learn and how we motivate students to come back to campus and to actually see a difference between a virtual class and a presential class. I would like to insist on the point on higher education didactics. No, I think we have there a broad field we need to develop even more. When I remember my own career as a student, and when I remember the courses I received at university, that is something I could not do to my students. So I think it is important to have in mind that we are not going back to normal. We are hopefully moving to a new normal where we actually think about what we are doing, how we are doing it, how we can put an added value to our presential classes, why it is important to come to campus. And I think this is likewise for students and professors. Where do the students see the advantages or perceive the advantages of being on campus, of receiving a presential class? And where do I see, as a professor, the added value of actually seeing my students, of seeing their reactions, of having them interact between themselves and with me? And I think there, as well as in the field of resilience, mental health, and all the issues that came up with the pandemic, there we have another field where we did a lot during the last years, the last 2 years, but where we still have many things to develop, no? And I think this is also another opportunity where we can reinvent the wheel again.
Yeah, and perhaps from a perspective of a professor who is not even a demi-do professor in Gießen, because I'm based in Bogota, and that would be really for a sustainable issue and other things impossible. So I think actually we will maintain some things of virtuality. We have virtual master programs, I guess, both in Gießen and at Uniandes, for instance. So, of course, I do not want to be the person, I really do not think that that's the future, the only future of higher education, but we also have so good experiences, for instance, with the virtual internationalization program at Gießen. And actually, I wanted to talk about that because I'm so excited about something which will start in Germany. We start in one week, our semester. And I will do a class on peace and conflict studies. And there are, that will be, I guess, basically virtual. And there come so many people from all over the world, who are at Gießen, studying in international master, or yeah, I guess basically master programs from this virtual internationalization program. And there is this horrible situation in Europe, in Ukraine, and Gießen has partner universities from Ukraine. And so as far as Julia would be, or could talk about it much better than I do, but there is the situation that we receive a lot of students, so the university asked us if we could receive them. And now I saw enrollment from students from Kiev and other parts of Ukraine to a course on peace and conflict studies. And actually, I'm not an expert on the situation in Eastern Europe, but I think that's also something which gives the possibility of these virtual seminars, programs, to talk with students from all over the world on issues which are so important today. And that might be other issues, that might be climate change, that might be so many different issues. And I think that's really something we should maintain. So of course it's not only about that, but I think we also see here that we can really have situations of teaching which would have been or would be impossible to think about it. And of course, with this special situation, not only in my course, in many courses in Gießen, and I could imagine also in other universities, that's also kind of solidarity what we can do now in a situation where, where this horrible situation in Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And for closing remarks, I would like to second your words, Professor Peters, and from everybody in the panel. But going back to the virtual international program, we received that invitation from University of Giessen, and that opened so many conversations, so interesting, that have developed enormously. And my proposal for those sitting here in the panel is that I've discussed it with Silvia before. I have a dream for the students here at Uniandes, and I would love that to be a dream as well for the students at Giessen, based on your example. What if all students that experience Uniandes at the undergraduate level could take one virtual international program to be in an international class, at least 3 credits in their undergrad program? I think that would be a tremendous change, something I would have loved to have as a student, but that was, unimaginable back then. We've learned that we need the in-person, but we could have an international room, the virtual international program, Giessen Uniandes. It was your invitation to us, and now we have it in our strategic plan. We've changed the acronym to have the Uniandes flavor, But what if all students that come through, through our doors, when they graduate, they at least have those 3 credits? And it would be a great way to open, new conversations and maybe have something to remember of what we learned through the pandemic. So I'll leave that on the floor for the discussion later. At lunch. Thank you very much. You've been inspiring to us. You've highlighted fantastic issues. Great to have these conversations, especially on campus, so that this is the right place and, with the right friends to have the conversation. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all that have joined us today for this hour. I know many of you are hungry already, so you're all free to go and have lunch. Thank you very much. An applause, please.
I know how to do it in Zoom, but